Why does God permit suffering? Suffering exists because of the sin in the world, which includes our own moral faults. Although we were redeemed by our Lord Jesus Christ, every man must have his share in the mystery of redemption. As a consequence, it is more logical and more consoling that you accept failures, errors, and tribulations as transient proof to merit heaven, or as didactic designs of divine providence to correct your conduct. These sufferings serve as a stimulus of Christian hope to reach the enchanting glory of the fatherland, where there are no frustrations or anything negative. On accepting the fifth dimension, she continued, it is indispensable you modify the image you have forged about things. The true form of beings during their existence does not coincide with what you actually perceive. You only observe what happens to bodies in the present moment. You view such changes sequentially. You are forced to study them with mnemotechnic devices, photographs, descriptions, models, graphics, computations, but it is unfeasible to view the same being in the space-time which just occurred, much less what happened to it a day ago or a year ago. However, remember that every real being is the sum of the space-times corresponding to all its acts of existence. But if it were like that, beings would interweave in the boundary of created eternity, because if one thing would transform, its matter would be used for something else. It would result in the same matter serving for many distinct bodies. That's what happens, but with no inconvenience. For example, the wood from a tree is transformed to a table and later to firewood, but the being of a tree, a table, and firewood are not the same. They do not exist simultaneously. They correspond to different space-times. The being of the tree preceded that of the table, which in turn preceded the firewood. You should understand that no created being is completely simple. In every material creature, there are various levels or grades of existence. Accordingly, in man you find in first place the degree of existence as a person formed by the total organism and the spiritual soul. Another grade of existence is cellular, that is to say, the complex of living cells at any given moment. These cells, although they totally depend on the man, have a certain independence with respect to their specialized life, and they possess properties different from the whole organism. One would need to mention, moreover, the chemical level of existence of the same human being in the defined spacetime of its life, and the energy level corresponding to every instant of its pilgrimage. This signifies that the beings mix up in the fifth dimension. They mix, but without confusion. They only interrelate with much joy, because all are bound by universal love. We don't confuse one another because of the continuance of our being in the fifth dimension. I was telling you that every act of existence, every phenomenon, endures in its instantaneous and exclusive space-time. As a consequence, she affirmed, don't conceptualize man's integral organism as an immense number of bodies simultaneously departing from one another. No, because the acts of existence were not simultaneous. They happened at different space-times, and although all corporeal states persist as an interminable line, they persist chronologically and are spatially ordered, without the possibility of intercommunication, because of the bonding of the consciousness to the present moment. Later, I'll tell you how the space-times of a blessed are related. What then is the true form of things? The form of every object differs and is of much greater value than what is observed. It is much more extensive in space. To understand the true aspect of something, you need to mentally add the sequence of images, one by one, of the innumerable space-times corresponding to the acts of its existence. These spacetimes chronologically aggregate and exactly mark the historical development of the body in question in eternal objective reality. Convince yourself that the being you see and its complete becoming, which you are unable to observe, form a real, continuous, and inseparable whole. It is difficult to imagine something under these conditions. Try, for example, to imagine the Earth in the fifth dimension. Instead of representing it as an immense globe, try to see it as a grandiose comet, in whose majestic and unending tail is found the entire history of all the real, living, and immutable beings that have ever existed. The form of a ball is spherical in actual instant, but in the fifth dimension it is exceedingly elongated, such that it corresponds to the trajectory of all its movements. The spiral line the spiral line is the favorite line in the universe. Observe, she firmly stated, that prior images correspond to current cosmology. Don't forget that the objective world of reality, according to modern relativistic theories, does not happen, does not succeed, is not annihilated, it simply exists. Beings are transformed in the present moment, but they subsist safely in the past. Never can a planet crash with itself, she told me on reading the objection in my consciousness, in spite of the exact periodicity of its revolution in orbit. The new theory of the expanding universe maintains that even though planetary orbits are exactly periodic, no star would ever return to be in the same place, although they all maintained their relative distances from one another. In our case, it would be the same for the theory of a retracting universe. Are you saying that when I put a pencil in the same place where previously there was a pen, that I am mistaken? Of course, an instant passed. The space time of the pencil precedes that of the pen, but each of them persists without end in its corresponding act of existence. Every created or real being lasts forever, synchronously with all the others at a rhythm of a clock, in its innumerable space-times, with all its becoming, without danger of colliding with itself or others. Collisions only happen in the present moment. Perhaps the expansion of the universe is due to the fifth dimension. Yes, both are a consequence of the exact harmony of the cosmos. You need, moreover, to modify the conventional, subjective, and entrenched models which have been suggested to you until today. It is necessary to foster a legitimate optimism in yourself and what surrounds you, to erase the false and restrictive idea that the past is annihilated. It is advantageous, on the other hand, to hope in the divine providence of heaven, so you can live here in peace. To open your spirit to the notion of created eternity or the perpetual storehouse of past time. It is difficult to renounce what is observed, that beings definitely come to an end. Consider that if some being were annihilated or lost its form during its temporal evolution or its becoming, it would remain only in God's mind as a remembrance of the past. Don't you think it would be going too far to attribute to our God, who is most simple, the cerebral circumvolutions of memory? Created eternity is most convenient for absolute divine eternity. Moreover, she argued, wouldn't the divine love wish not just to remember, but to restore to his beloved and blessed children those earthly moments of fidelity to divine grace and moments of prayer and mortification for love of charity? And the blessed, would we not wish for something similar in the glory? Would you not be pleased to restore in a beneficial manner the frustrations and sorrows of your history? And how then would those just longings be satisfied if the past were completely annihilated? I understand that God will permit us to participate in his absolute eternity. Precisely. Created eternity is the analogous participation in the absolute divine eternity, only that the fifth dimension does not start until heaven. It is already with you on earth. And there is still another proof of created eternity, she added. Wouldn't you feel strange that only the merit of all your good works remained before the Most High, and that their remembrance for you was turbid? Don't you believe that this situation would be the height of pessimism? On the contrary, the moral certitude, not absolute evidence of the everlasting duration of your complete being, as well as other people and things, give you strength and hope, and it harmonizes divine providence with what happens to you as a traveler. Doesn't it seem strange, she added, that the scenes of the great Christian mysteries do not exist in actuality? On the contrary, if you accept created eternity, the history of salvation exists forever. And so it is. How sad that it is not possible for you to view the crib of Bethlehem, the Sermon on the Mount, the Last Supper, the cross of the redemption. All of these are conserved alive, but without sorrow, because they have been freed of the tragic actual instant. You are right. The eternity of the Eucharist and the eternal rest of those who died faithfully to God are religious beliefs which speak in favor of the fifth dimension. However tenderly loved, those who are loved die, youth passes, riches are lost, and precious objects are broken. This is the appearance, nothing else. Here you have still another proof of the continued existence of things. Would our Lord, perhaps, who loves us so much, permit a legitimate desire only to leave it eternally unsatisfied? Our God does not give and then take natural goods, never does he retake his gifts. I will relate to you an anecdote that happened to me. When my young son, hardly 3 years old, died, I was inconsolable. In my desperation, I said to our God, why did you give him to me if you intended to take him so quickly? I never forgot this pain in my mortal life, but once glorified, the Lord brought me to these critical space times of my past. He consoled me tenderly as only He knows how to do. He made me see the design of the premature death of my dear son, and He put him in my arms, alive and resplendent. I did not take him. The Most High said to me, I only asked to borrow him. In this most pleasing way, the remembrance of my maternal pain was more than consoled, thanks to the continuance of things and persons in all their ages of development. And, she added, another proof of created eternity is the intense desire for the immortality of beauty and of love which passions all of us. You will see that we creatures are mirrors of our Creator when we proceed with purity, and the love of the Most High is incompatible with lasting frustrations. Only sin which has not received divine pardon fails forever. Therefore, beauty, love, and those things that preserve them should last without end in the fifth dimension. It is certain some poets have written poems about eternity, not about its expectation, but about its actual presence. And you, to the contrary, because of an improper indulgence to the fragile testimony of your senses, resist believing in the logical continuation of all things. The desire for created eternity is so forceful, being a requirement of truth, that even the language grammatically lends itself to the fifth dimension. The historical present and the anti present are furtive yearnings for perpetuity. Perhaps in the future the truth will govern, she concluded, and people will think and speak in terms of the fifth dimension. For the moment, before the change in mentality, all of you are using inaccurate verbs such as lose, annihilate, happens, which are common but do not correspond to objective reality. Little by little, however, to the extent that the transcendence of the eternity of things is recognized, the language and customs will change, although it will not in a short period of time. I didn't stop observing with amazement, curiously, and pride. I didn't stop observing with amazement, curiosity, and pride the prolongation of my body in a childhood form, paralyzed next to the piano. Would you like to prove, tenderly loved soon said, that you and this child are the same person? I thought she would permit a conversation between the child and me, a conversation with me myself. Although at times I have carried on a monologue, how marvelous now to carry on a dialogue with myself. Yes, for sure, I responded. Good. But first, I want to explain that only your soul is going to bilocate with respect to your consciousness. This is to say that it is going to consciously operate in two distinct spacetimes and your two bodies. Clearly, your soul maintains life at every stage of biological development, which remain in the fifth dimension, but without your being conscious of it. Bilocation consists, she continued, in the same spiritual being, either a human soul or an angelic spirit, consciously acting in two distinct places at the same time or in two different spacetimes. In this case, your bilocation will not be simultaneous in that 48 years which separate your two bodies. It will be in two distinct spacetimes. I should tell you that human bilocation is not exclusively spiritual. In addition to the spiritual soul, the biological energy of the body intervenes. This biological energy is consubstantial and inseparable from the soul. Conscious bilocation and multilocation, she added, are quite frequent phenomena in celestial life. They permit the blessed to enjoy new and very pleasing sensations. Does bilocation happen in animals? In any intellectual sense, certainly not, because the souls of animals are not spiritual, that is to say, they are incapable of reflecting or loving as does man. However, in an inferior manner, exclusively energetic, yes. In this sense, they produce some communications at great distances among irrational creatures. The immaterial soul of such a creature enjoys great powers. Then do animals also have hunches? In a way, very inferior to persons, but yes, they are present. Don't reduce the universe to the terrestrial life that you know, matter and energy. Many other elements exist. I don't know them completely, but I can mention super energy and infra energy, which are very common. I will tell you more about this later. The souls of organisms inferior to man, she assured me, will never directly know God, nor will they possess Him with supreme love as do the blessed. But through glorified man, as the priest of the irrational creatures, matter, energy, and vegetables receive their happiness. They live eternally in the fifth dimension, and it is in that very place they will be glorified in their own way. You say they lived because the majority have already died? They also passed through the fourth dimension of time and died. But don't forget that they exist and they live forever in the ambient of created eternity. For example, look at that fly on the upper plane of the window. It is in a position to fly, although it isn't moving. It lives in this precise space time, and without knowing it, awaits its glorification, that which will come from some glorified person. What I say about the fly also pertains to the dog lying on the other sidewalk and applies also to the matter energy of this window and to all of the houses of this block and to the entire city. The universal love which interrelates creatures among themselves and souls with their Creator is abundantly fulfilled in heaven. But for how long will they be glorified? If I speak in terms of the year in which we are visiting, I would say some day. But if I answer you from the viewpoint of created eternity, I assure you that they are already being glorified to the limit of their natural capacity. Remember that the past, present, and future are purely subjective notions, although necessary for the traveler. Well, then, by reason of the universal and multiple love of heaven, the blessed enjoy their accidental glory, and they bring joy to the inferior creatures. It is fascinating that we will find all creatures bound with reciprocal, joyful ties, a pleasant, universal love.